My name is Jessica Hale, and I'm 35. I've learned that when a room turns against you, it doesn't always happen with shouting. Sometimes it happens with laughter, polite, sparkling laughter, served in crystal glasses you paid for. That night, the room was full of people I didn't know. They were beautiful strangers in vintage Hollywood costumes, leaning on the furniture like it belonged to them. Men with slick hair and lazy confidence. Women with red lips and champagne smiles. Someone had put up a backdrop that looked like an old film premiere. Spotlights, faux velvet ropes, a golden 30 hanging from the ceiling. It was my boyfriend Caleb's birthday party. His 30th. He'd been planning it for months, treating it like the coronation of a king who'd finally decided to accept applause. "It's not just a party, Jess," he'd told me, eyes bright. "It's a milestone. I want it to feel iconic." So I made it iconic. I handled the venue deposit when his card mysteriously declined. I upgraded the catering when he said the food didn't match the vibe. I paid for the champagne tower because the cheaper option looked sad. I even approved the private photographer he insisted on because he said memories mattered, while I quietly wondered if what he really wanted was proof. All night, I floated at the edges of my own expense. I wasn't the star, I was the stagehand. Every time someone's glass dipped low, I nodded to the bartender. Every time a tray emptied, I caught a server's eye. Every time Caleb's friends got loud, I smiled like this was all effortless, like I wasn't mentally calculating how many hours of my life this performance cost. Caleb, of course, was perfect in front of them. He wore a black suit with a satin lapel and a vintage pocket watch he kept pulling out for dramatic effect. He kissed cheeks, shook hands, laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. And he barely looked at me, not in the way a boyfriend looks at a woman he's proud of, more like the way a man looks at the lighting rig, something useful, something expected to work, something you only notice when it malfunctions. The theme was vintage Hollywood, but the atmosphere felt more like politics, alliances, introductions, subtle power plays. That's what most people don't understand about parties like this. They're not celebrations. They're campaigns. And I could feel Caleb running his. His best friend, Becca, stayed glued to his side like an advisor. She was stunning in a silver dress that clung to her like liquid and a faux fur stole that screamed money, even if it wasn't. She had always looked at me the same way she looked at a smudge on a mirror, something that ruined the aesthetic. Becca smiled at me once that night, not a warm smile, the kind that says, "I see what you are and I'm not impressed." By midnight, the crowd had been drinking long enough to be generous with applause. The music softened. The photographer herded people into a semicircle. Caleb climbed onto a small platform near the bar, lifted his glass, and waited. The room hushed like the theater right before the lead speaks. I stood near the edge, half shadowed by the liquor display. That was my position all night, close enough to be useful, far enough to be forgettable. Caleb began his speech with practiced charm. He thanked everyone for coming. He praised his parents for always believing in him. He nodded to his friends, the real ones, the people who made life worth living. And then he paused. A deliberate pause, long enough to make the room lean forward. His eyes scanned the crowd like he was searching for the most important person there. And when he found her, his face softened. A woman near the back, leaning against the wall like she belonged in a magazine spread. Dark hair, perfect posture, an expression that balanced boredom and superiority like it was an art form. Danielle, his ex-girlfriend, the ghost that had lived in our relationship since the beginning. Caleb's voice shifted, warmer, more intimate. "And I have to give a special thank you," he said, "to my amazing friend, Danielle." The room reacted immediately. Heads turned. People smiled like they were witnessing a romantic subplot. Caleb continued, and I watched his mouth form words that felt like blades. "My ex, yes," he said with a small laugh, as if it was cute, as if it was mature. "But also the woman who truly taught me what I deserve. She raised the bar for what a partner should be, and I'll always be grateful for the time we had." Applause erupted. Real applause. Whistles. Someone actually clapped over their head like this was a wedding toast. Danielle gave a gracious little wave, the kind that said, "Of course you're grateful. You should be." I didn't move. Not because it didn't hurt. Because in my line of work, you don't react when your opponent lands a hit. You log it. You study the room. You note who smiled, who looked away, who enjoyed the spectacle. Becca's eyes flicked toward me, eager, waiting for my face to crack. I kept it smooth. Caleb basked in the moment, letting the praise swell around him like a spotlight. Then the applause started to fade, and that's when he finally remembered I existed. His gaze slid to me briefly. barely a second, like checking a box. "Oh," he added, waving his hand vaguely in my direction. "And thanks to her too, I guess, for everything." Not my name, not Jessica, not even a real acknowledgement. Just a vague gesture, a footnote tacked onto his masterpiece. A few people laughed, quietly, politely, the way people laugh when they're told it's acceptable. I felt the humiliation ripple through my body, hot and sharp. But my face didn't change. I lifted my drink and took a slow sip, because I recognized what he'd done. Caleb hadn't just embarrassed me, he'd defined me. In public, in front of 50 witnesses who would carry that story into every brunch, every group chat, every soft-lit after-party. Danielle is the standard. Jessica is the placeholder. I could almost hear the narrative forming. The kind that spreads because it's entertaining, because it flatters the people repeating it. Caleb stepped down, greeted by hugs and compliments. Danielle drifted closer to him, and I saw the way she touched his arm like she still had access. And in that moment, something inside me went quiet. A switch flipping. Not rage. Not tears. Something colder. Something organized. Let me be clear. I'm not a saint. I'm not a victim who just takes it. I'm a political campaign manager. My job is to win. I take flawed candidates and turn them into leaders people trust. I do opposition research. I manage messaging. I control media cycles. I identify weaknesses and exploit them with the precision of a surgeon. My entire career is strategy, perception, and the ruthless execution of a plan. 8 months ago, I met Caleb when I'd just come off the most brutal campaign of my life. A successful Senate race that left me burned out and empty. I called it my off-season. I wanted something simple. Caleb was simple. Beautiful smile, easy charm, hungry for a lifestyle he didn't know how to build on his own. I saw the red flags early. The casual materialism, the need for validation, the way he talked about Danielle like she was a trophy he'd lost and wanted back. But I wasn't looking for forever. I told him that from the beginning. He agreed. Or at least he acted like he did. The arrangement was clear. I provided stability and a world he could show off. And he provided fun companionship while I recharged. A short-term contract. The problem was, Caleb started acting like the position was permanent. And tonight, at his party, his performance had become unacceptable. As the night wound down and the last guest stumbled out, Caleb climbed into bed and passed out without even asking if I was okay. He didn't have to. He thought he'd won. But while he slept, I sat in my home office, the glow of my laptop painting my hands blue-white. I opened a blank document and typed a title the way I always did when a new fight began. Campaign plan. Because Caleb thought we were in a relationship. But after tonight, we were in an election. And I don't lose. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken, but because my brain was awake in the way it always gets when a new campaign begins. Sharp, methodical, alive. By sunrise, Caleb was still snoring softly in my bed, sprawled across the sheets, like a man who believed the world would keep cushioning his fall. I made coffee and opened my laptop. In politics, the first rule of winning is simple. You don't attack until you understand the terrain. So for the next 48 hours, I became what I always become when I need to dismantle someone quietly. A one-woman opposition research firm. I started with Caleb. That part was easy. For 8 months, I had unknowingly been compiling his file. All I had to do was organize it. I pulled up my credit card statements and began logging every expense connected to him. Not emotionally, clinically. Date, amount, purpose. Designer jackets he wore once and never again. $500 dinners with Becca where he'd forgotten his wallet. Weekend trips he claimed were spontaneous, but somehow always happened after I'd had a good month professionally. Gym memberships, bottle service. A watch he swore was an investment. I wasn't just tracking money. I was mapping his entire lifestyle ecosystem. In campaign terms, Caleb was a candidate with no grassroots support, no real income, no independent infrastructure. His donors were me. His surrogates were shallow friends. His platform was image. And image, I knew, is fragile. Next, I mapped his social capital. The committees, the charity boards, the invitations he loved to mention casually but never actually worked for. There it was, the gala. A glamorous charity event he bragged about every year, like his presence alone elevated it. He loved telling people he was on the committee, though I'd never once seen him attend a planning meeting or write a check. But I had. 3 months earlier, I'd made a significant donation to that charity, under my name. Caleb had loved it, loved how it sounded when he told people his girlfriend was a major supporter. I closed my laptop for a moment and smiled. Then I made a call. The head of the organizing committee was a woman I'd crossed paths with professionally. Sharp, efficient, discreet. I kept my tone polite, apologetic. I need to pull my donation for this year, I said. Some portfolio restructuring, nothing personal. She was surprised, of course, but she understood. People always do when you speak calmly and vaguely. I thanked her, hung up, and waited, because I knew exactly what would happen next. Sure enough, that evening, Caleb stormed into the apartment like a man whose reflection had cracked. "What did you do?" he demanded, voice already shaking with anger. I didn't look up from my laptop. "What are you talking about?" "Cynthia called me," he snapped. "She said you pulled your donation. Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" I finally lifted my eyes. "It was a business decision," I said evenly. "Market conditions change. I'm reallocating capital." "This isn't about capital," he yelled. "This is about my reputation. You did this because of what I said at my party." I tilted my head, studying him the way I studied candidates who didn't realize they were bleeding support. "What you said at the party was data," I replied. "It helped me reassess the return on my investments." He stared at me, stunned. "The gala," I added, closing my laptop, "no longer makes financial sense." I watched it land. Caleb understood one language fluently: status. And I had just devalued his most visible asset. While he was still reeling from that, I moved on to the second target. Danielle, the gold standard, the woman who had raised the bar. In my experience, anyone who looks that effortless is either extraordinary or hiding something. I hired a freelancer I'd worked with before, a digital forensics specialist who dug up dirt on political opponents without crossing legal lines. I gave him Danielle's name, her startup's name, and one instruction. I don't want scandal, I want reality. While he worked, I watched Caleb try to recover. He became softer, nicer, complimented me more, asked if I was okay, suggested we take a weekend trip. Classic damage control. I let him believe it was working. Then, 3 days later, the report landed in my inbox. And it was beautiful. Danielle's startup, so buzzy, so admired, was a shell. No real product, no revenue, burning cash at a rate that would make any investor sweat. Its funding came almost entirely from friends of her wealthy father and high-interest personal loans. She wasn't a visionary. She was a trust fund kid playing entrepreneur. There was more. The vintage sports car she loved posting online? A lease. An expensive one, co-signed by her father, 2 months behind on payments. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. This wasn't just dirt. This was platform collapse. The narrative that made Danielle untouchable, the image Caleb had publicly worshipped, was a lie built on borrowed money and delayed consequences. In politics, that's what we call a vulnerability. And vulnerabilities don't need force. They just need exposure. I closed the report and opened a new document. Phase 2, weaponization. Because research is only useful if you know how to deploy it. And I was just getting started. In politics, truth is rarely powerful on its own. It needs framing. It needs timing. And most importantly, it needs the right audience. I didn't rush. That's where amateurs make mistakes. They get excited, emotional, sloppy. They want the reveal to feel dramatic. They want the satisfaction of watching the explosion up close. I wanted impact, not theater. So I waited 2 days, long enough for Caleb to convince himself the gala donation issue had blown over, long enough for Danielle's name to fade back into being just a pretty memory, long enough for everyone to return to their comfortable assumptions. Then I started building the narrative. I created a new anonymous email address, something neutral, corporate, forgettable. The kind that looked like it belonged to an analyst who drank black coffee and never raised their voice. From that address, I drafted a memo. It was written in the dry, clinical tone of an investment prospectus. No insults, no speculation, no emotional language, just facts. I laid out Danielle's startup in sections. Executive summary, no viable product, no meaningful revenue, unsustainable burn rate. Financial overview, 6 months from insolvency under current conditions. Funding sources, personal loans, family-backed investors, no independent validation. Historical pattern, a trail of failed ventures quietly buried by money and connections. The final page was my favorite. Publicly available records showing Danielle's history. Projects that launched with buzz, collapsed silently, and vanished without explanation. I didn't accuse. I didn't editorialize. I let the math speak. Then I sent the memo to exactly 3 people. Danielle's father, her lead investor, and a local business journalist known for loving stories about inflated startups and inherited privilege. That was it. No mass blast, no social media, no fingerprints. I hit send and closed my laptop. Because once information like that is in the right hands, you don't chase it. You let gravity do the work. While that digital bomb ticked quietly, I shifted focus back to Caleb's world, specifically the person who kept whispering poison in his ear. Becca. Becca was more than his best friend. She was his validator, his hype woman, the one who reinforced his belief that he deserved more, better, shinier. She worked as a personal shopper at a high-end department store. She loved the job because it gave her access to clothes, to wealthy clients, to the illusion of belonging. I'd listened to enough late-night conversations to know her secret. Borrowing designer outfits for the weekend, returning them Monday morning, using her employee discount to cycle luxury through her life without ever paying full price. She wasn't subtle, and she wasn't careful. Worse, she'd pulled Caleb into it, dressing him in things he couldn't afford, letting him play rich for Instagram. I made another anonymous call, this time to corporate loss prevention. I spoke calmly, clearly, like someone doing a civic duty. I believe an employee at your flagship store is running a return fraud scheme, I said. High-value items, repeated weekend use, Monday returns. I gave Becca's name. I suggested they review security footage and inventory logs from the past 6 months. Then I hung up. At that point, everything was in motion. Danielle's illusion, Becca's hustle, Caleb's borrowed status. I didn't need to push anymore. I just had to wait. The first explosion came 3 days later. The journalist published the story. It was brutal. Danielle's startup was described as a vanity project, a case study in entitlement. The article questioned how long investors had been ignoring obvious red flags, and why. By noon, her lead investor pulled funding. By evening, her father was threatening legal action. The woman who had raised the bar was suddenly radioactive. Caleb found out the same way everyone else did, through his phone. I watched him scroll in disbelief, his face draining of color. This can't be real, he muttered. She's smarter than this. I said nothing. The next morning, Becca was fired. Security footage, inventory logs, transaction histories. All of it lined up perfectly. The store wasn't just letting her go, they were pressing charges. Becca panicked. And when people panic, they betray. She blamed Caleb, claimed he pressured her, claimed she was just helping him keep up appearances. Caleb screamed back that it was her idea, that she dragged him into it. Their friendship disintegrated in real time. Text messages turned into accusations, then threats. By the end of the week, Caleb's world was unrecognizable. Danielle wouldn't take his calls. Becca was threatening legal action. His social circle went quiet. No invites, no check-ins, no reassurance. And still, he hadn't figured it out. That was the most fascinating part. He sat on the couch one night, head in his hands, and whispered, "I don't understand. Everything's just falling apart." I looked at him, the man who had dismissed me with a wave at his birthday party, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. Because he still thought this was bad luck. He still believed in coincidence. He still didn't realize that campaigns don't collapse on their own. They're dismantled. Caleb's breakdown didn't come all at once. It came in layers. Denial first, then bargaining, then something close to panic. For 2 days after the article dropped, he tried to pretend it wasn't real. He refreshed feeds obsessively, waiting for a retraction that never came. He drafted messages to Danielle he never sent. He paced the apartment like movement alone might restore balance. I watched quietly. In politics, this is the moment when a candidate realizes the polls are real and that no speech can save them. On the third night, he finally cracked. He came home late, eyes red, jacket unbuttoned, movements sloppy in a way I'd never seen before. He dropped his keys on the counter and sank onto the couch like gravity had doubled. "She won't answer me," he said hoarsely. "Danielle, she blocked me." I closed my laptop but didn't turn toward him. "Her investors pulled out," he continued, voice rising. "Her dad's furious. She says she needs space. She says I'm a distraction." I almost smiled. Not because he was hurting, but because I recognized the line. I need space. The universal translation of "you're no longer useful." "And Becca?" I asked calmly. He let out a sharp laugh that sounded like it hurt. "She's lost it. She's saying I ruined her life, that I pressured her. She's threatening to sue me if I don't help with legal fees." I turned then, slowly. "And will you?" He looked at me like the answer was obvious. "I don't have that kind of money." "No," I thought. "You never did?" Silence settled between us, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, he looked up at me. Really looked this time, like he was seeing me for the first time since his birthday party. "Jess," he said quietly, I don't know what's happening. Everything's collapsing at once. I studied his face. The confusion, the fear, the absence of accountability. In all the campaigns I've worked on, there's a moment candidates reach when they stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "Who betrayed me?" Caleb was there. "I just need some time," he said. "Can I stay here for a bit until things stabilize?" There it was. Not an apology, not remorse, a request for shelter. The truth landed cleanly, without drama. Caleb didn't love me. He loved what I provided: structure, insulation, credibility. I was never his partner. I was his infrastructure. I nodded once. "Sit tight," I said. "I need to take a call." I went into my office and closed the door. Then I made my final strategic move. I contacted the same journalist who'd exposed Danielle's startup. I framed it carefully, an off-the-record conversation. A background story, no names, no accusations, just context. I positioned myself as a private professional who had been targeted by a group of social climbers, people who mistook access for merit. I spoke about reputational damage, about how quiet contributors often get erased in favor of louder narratives. I didn't mention Caleb. I didn't need to. The details were specific enough that anyone in their circle would recognize the situation instantly. 2 days later, the follow-up story ran. It painted me as measured, strategic, wronged, but smart enough to exit before being dragged down. It destroyed any chance Caleb had of reframing himself as the victim. By the time he realized what had happened, it was already too late. He came to me that night, shaking. "They're talking about you," he said. "People are connecting it. They're saying you saw through all of us." I met his gaze steadily. "They're saying the truth," I replied. That's when he understood. Not everything, but enough. His voice dropped to a whisper. Was this you?" I didn't answer immediately. In politics, timing matters. "Yes," I said finally. "It was." He stared at me like the floor had vanished beneath him. "I didn't yell," I continued. "I didn't fight. You publicly defined me as disposable. I treated it like an in-kind donation to my own campaign." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "I'm not your opponent in life, Caleb," I said softly, "but you made me one." He stood there, hollowed out, watching the realization sink in. "You can't stay here," I said, standing. "Our contract expired." I handed him a box I'd packed earlier that day. His essentials. Nothing sentimental. He didn't beg. He didn't argue. He just took the box and walked out. And when the door closed behind him, the apartment went still. For the first time in weeks, I slept. People think victory feels loud. They imagine shouting, slammed doors, dramatic confrontations in the rain. In reality, real wins are almost silent. A month passed. By then, the dust had settled enough for patterns to emerge. And patterns never lie. Caleb tried to rebuild his story. At first, he attempted a soft rebrand. New haircut, motivational quotes on social media, carefully cropped photos in borrowed spaces meant to suggest momentum. But narratives need fuel, and Caleb had none. The follow-up article had done more damage than I'd anticipated, not because it attacked him directly, but because it reframed the entire situation. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a glamorous man betrayed by bad luck. It was about a group of people who mistook proximity for power, and the woman who quietly withdrew the scaffolding holding them up. Caleb's remaining friends drifted away one by one, not dramatically, just less available. Missed calls, unanswered messages, invitations that never came. That's how social exile really works. Danielle disappeared almost entirely. Her startup officially shut down within weeks. Lawsuits followed. Investors distanced themselves publicly. The car vanished from her Instagram feed. Becca was still fighting her legal battle, scrambling for sympathy that no longer existed. And Caleb? Caleb showed up at my door 2 days after the final article ran. He looked smaller. Not physically, something worse. Deflated. His clothes were rumpled. His confidence was gone. His voice shook when he spoke. "I messed up," he said. "I didn't realize what I had. I let my ego run things." I listened. I always listen. "I thought the party didn't matter," he continued. "I thought you'd understand. I didn't know it would destroy everything." I studied him carefully. This was the moment people mistake for closure. It wasn't. "You didn't make a mistake," I said calmly. His head snapped up. "You ran a terrible campaign," I continued. "Your messaging was inconsistent. You elevated unreliable supporters, and you publicly insulted the one person stabilizing your entire operation." His face drained of color. "This was all you," he whispered. "Danielle, Becca, the stories. You planned it." I didn't deny it. "I manage campaigns," I said evenly. "You attacked my character in public. I treated it as an opportunity." Tears welled in his eyes. I thought we were in a relationship. I met his gaze without cruelty. We weren't, I said. We were in an election, and you chose the wrong opponent. The realization hit him fully then. Slow, horrifying, irreversible. I closed the door. That was the last time I saw him. I heard later that Caleb moved back in with his parents. The lifestyle evaporated. The invitations stopped. He took a job he'd once mocked. Something stable, something quiet. Danielle is still untangling lawsuits. Becca is still paying for what she thought no one would notice. And me? I went back to work. Another campaign. Another war room. Another reminder that power doesn't always announce itself. Caleb saw me as background noise, as a footnote in the story of his life. He never understood the truth. The quiet woman at the edge of the room is often the one running the entire show. He thought he was the candidate. He never realized he was just the opposition.